Western civilization is moving closer to a point of irreconcilable, unstable equilibrium, as frighteningly increasing numbers of people trust nothing. Media, academia, and especially the governments are no longer held in high esteem. Regaining trust is often impossible after betrayal. However, transparency is essential to any healing process, and that is the essence of the Don Sullivan Show. Please listen to the team explore, probe, and debate cutting-edge science, technology, and computing. Play ball!
Welcome to a very special episode of the Don Sullivan Show. As you can hear, Don is currently on the road, and you're going to learn more about that very shortly. I'm your co-host, Jersey Steve. First, we want to thank our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by License Fortress, the industry's first and only software asset management firm to offer both a financial and legal guarantee at its highest level of service. Whether it's Oracle, Microsoft, or VMware, License Fortress helps organizations stay compliant, avoid audits, and save money. You can learn more at licensefortress.com. And please support our producer, our wonderful producer, Bill Axt, by visiting axtinc.com. That is AXTINK.com. You can subscribe to his YouTube channel and help support his efforts to create humorous animation, as well as run our website, all while researching a cure for baldness.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this special episode of the Don Sullivan Show, which will be the final episode of the Climbing Kilimanjaro series. Now, although there may be some medical discussions afterwards about the various different distinctions that occur medically in Africa versus the United States, the needs to take different types of medications, the care that you must, if you're a visitor from the United States and Africa, take over what you eat and how you deal with water, drinking water, washing water, showering water, water on lettuce that you might eat. There's going to be a lot of that. We're going to have a whole separate episode on that. But this will be the last episode on climbing Kilimanjaro. And you know what? We are done with climbing Kilimanjaro. And Sean and I have been successful, along with a couple of other folks in our group. So today, this episode is going to start with an episode of Sean and I waiting at the hotel as Sean leaves for the U.S., and I will be staying to take a different expedition over on the west side of Tanzania, specifically in the Serengeti National Park. Now, admittedly, the term Serengeti, or Serengeti, I guess is how you pronounce it properly in Swahili, extends way beyond Serengeti National Park. It extends up into Kenya and I suppose out into eastern Tanzania as well, where we are basically everything in the shadow of Kilimanjaro. But Serengeti National Park itself has a very special history and a very special area in that the numbers of animals that exist there are utterly astounding. From what I've heard, I haven't been there yet. So we're going to see everything from leopards to hippopotamuses to rhinoceroses to all kinds of birds to hundreds and hundreds of elephants and lions and warthogs, and not the planes but the animals, and everything else that you could imagine in the African savannah. So we will start this off with a flight from Kilimanjaro or Arusha, the town near Kilimanjaro, so Arusha Airport, to the middle Serona or Serenova, small little landing strip in the middle of Serengeti National Park, and meet our guide there and spend the next 4.5 days. Hopefully the weather will be a little bit better. and hopefully we will see what we're out to see. Now, we're in the middle of, I guess it's pretty much continuous, but what's called the Great Migration, in which millions, literally millions of wildebeest migrate from the south, or migrate from the north to the south to follow the rains. The rains create enormous grasslands on the savannah. The savannah is somewhat different than what you would picture the American Midwest to be, say in the mid-1800s, before the great slaughters of the bison, in that it's completely flat with some acacia trees. You can see horizon to horizon, and I'm really looking forward to that. And supposedly there are animals that really do live in great serenity, zebras and antelope of all kinds, and wildebeest and border buffalo, lions spread throughout. Apparently we're going to see for a good 100 miles in south of the Serengeti National Park, as they all go down to feed on the growing grasses because the rainy season is upon us. And during the dry seasons, they move back up north towards the north of Serengeti National Park and the border of Kenya, and they have to go over a very precarious river, in which you may have seen on some rather brutal TV shows, National Geographic and such, where many or a number of those wildebeest don't make it across, particularly the young and the old ones, because the river is infested with crocodiles who take the opportunity to feed themselves. So it's a bit of a cycle of life, and it goes all the way from the north of Kenya down to the south of Tanzania and the south of the Serengeti National Park, which is very much protected. So that's what we're going to be doing for the next 5 days. And it is going to be the 4th episode of Climbing Kilimanjaro, and that is the episode which will be heretofore known as the Serengeti, Sleeping with Elephants. And you'll see why that is as we get down through the episode. So before we start with an interview with Sean, I will say see ya until we get back on. Well, hello again, folks. This is Don from the Don Sullivan Show, back with another version of the show. This special series on climbing Kilimanjaro. We've had a number of different episodes already, and throughout these episodes you've heard me reference a good friend of mine, Sean Campbell. Sean is got a lot more aspirations than most of us. He is a very successful venture capitalist lawyer and does a lot of other things in the back of his head as we successfully climbed Kilimanjaro together. He did make a couple of comments during the climb over the 10 days. So I wanted to give him a chance to actually talk more in depth about the overall experience. But as usual, we at least have to read our disclaimer before the beginning of this episode. This episode will not be exclusively about climbing Kilimanjaro, but we're going to go over, not Sean, but a few of us are going to go over to the other side of the country of Tanzania, the west side, and have a 5-day safari in Serengeti National Park. But before Sean leaves to fly back to his real life in the Washington, D.C. area, I really wanted to give him a chance to answer some questions and to make some comments, because he's very insightful and very knowledgeable overall. But as usual, our lawyers, including Sean as a consultant, want me to read out our famous now disclaimer, and we will do so. So all comments on Don Sullivan Show are the opinions of the guests and the hosts, and do not reflect any greater depth of understanding of all statements by the ghost, all statements by the host and guests on the Don Sullivan Show are the personal opinions of the host and the guest, who all agree that the following content is the property of Zanalytics LLC to be used publicly and exclusively on the Don Sullivan Show. And again, Sean is shaking his head in agreement, and I always do, of course. So let's get on with some questions. So, Sean, it was wonderful doing this overall trek with you over the last 2 weeks. So tell me, how was the experience?
Oh, it was tremendous on so many levels. It was really not just the top, but really it was the journey getting there. All the different landscapes, all the biodiversity, going from just desolate, endless rock to gardens that look like the French countryside, up to glaciers, and then down through rainforest. It's just, you really feel like you saw the whole world and the moon and the heavens and everything in between over 12 days. And that's just the physical landscape. Then there's the humanity and the community and the cooperation.
So what I want to know from you is what was the best, the hardest, and the most frightening aspects of this overall experience to you?
Well, there were a couple low points. There was the throwing up on day 2.
Yeah, that was pretty scary.
Yeah.
But you stayed. A few other people we know had to be chopped out.
Yeah, it just came so suddenly, and it was so early in the trip that there was a lot of uncertainty. I really think the Nalgene bottle saved me. Anyhow, hardest.
That was the heat, the water, the bottle we put the hot water in. You heard about that on the Wayne Howell episode.
Yes, and the 3-hour descent in the snowstorm after the summit was the hardest. And I had thought I was going to say that the 2 hours right before getting up to the summit, the final ascent, was the hardest, but then that was superseded by the descent in the snowstorm.
Yeah, the weather and the steepness and the slipperiness made it amazingly difficult, and it's just so relentless. They're just pounding and pounding in your legs, isn't it?
Yes, and then, you're changing altitude again, descending now, and the headaches and the nausea in the middle of the snowstorm and the steepness, and it was a combination of a lot of things at once, but there was never any doubt between the two of us that we were going to do what we needed to do.
I don't know if never, but yeah, close.
All right, well, maybe after the vomiting, but other than that.
Okay, what did you do to train for this?
Yeah, well, I hadn't been exercising in a long time, so when you asked me to do this about a year ago, I knew that was an excuse to go to the gym, and I got a personal trainer, and 3 times a week I went for about 9 months. First, it was sort of just doing some basic body strength without any, just to get my legs back into having stability and strength. Once we built the stability, then we moved on to doing some weight training, upper body, back, legs, shoulders, everything like that. And then once November hit, I just started going on the treadmill for 12 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week at a 25% incline grade, while doing more endurance aerobic rather than anaerobic exercises to build endurance in addition to strength.
Well, that sure seemed to work out for you. You were not sucking wind nearly as badly as I was up around 18.5. So, other than the magnificence and majesty of the landscape and the euphoria of the accomplishment, what else stood out to you? And I mean on a human level.
Yeah, I mean the spirit of every single guide and the men and women of Kilimanjaro who really know every inch of this mountain in the middle of the night. They can run it. They're not going to trip. Most likely, they just implicitly are in communion with the mountain, and in many ways with each other. I mean, it was such an incredibly well-oiled machine. The locals, I didn't see make one mistake in 9 days. and their spirit. They really wanted us to succeed. It was incredibly important to them. And and I guess one thing I would like to also bring full circle, we discussed a few days ago the brief negotiation we had, and I'd just like to say, once we had that and we resolved it, that sometimes challenging first principle, maybe there's a law of thermodynamics about that, I'm not sure, but we mutual respect and cooperation proceeded from that as well, and it was just we really all worked together so well, and we're very grateful to everyone on that journey.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you're referring to all of the individuals, maybe 60 or 70, that helped our group of 8 accomplish this amazing feat. The people on the ground, and not necessarily, and that's this discussion for a different day, but not necessarily the overall American companies that were running the tours.
Yes, I'm speaking specifically just to the men and women of Kilimanjaro, which does not include anyone who did not step foot on this mountain. In fact, it excludes all who did not step foot on this mountain during this journey.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. And I particularly agree, as I am a keen observer of athleticism, the incredible level of fitness of not young kids, but young middle-aged people in their 30s and 40s having literally superhuman skills of being able to carry, as I've joked before, these broken down little towns, run past us on these rocky trails and have them all set up before we even get there in our exhausted states at night. And in a rather naive way, we both consider ourselves to be pretty athletic and pretty capable, right?
Yeah, I think as evidenced by our results here, that would be a fair statement.
Yeah. So anything else you want to add? Anything else I missed?
Thank you, Don. Thank you for making this possible. Couldn't have done it without you, and couldn't have done it without the men and women of Kilimanjaro.
And thank you, Sean. And folks, I'm going to see you for now, and we're headed over to the Serengeti National Park. So talk soon. Well, hi, folks. Welcome back to the Don Sullivan Show. It's actually been a day and a half since my last segment, when we were talking to Sean Campbell, my climbing partner up Mount Kilimanjaro. Since then, a lot has happened. Sean has gone home after he bought his beautiful wife about $3,000 worth of Tanzanite, local Tanzanite earrings. Absolutely beautiful. Both the wife and the earrings. And Sean should be back in the United States by now. But today, we took a flight out to the western part of the Serengeti, or northern part of Tanzania, to the Serengeti, which is specifically Serengeti National Park, and it is absolutely utterly amazing. We met by our guide and driven around the park, and I am not kidding. In the savannah here, we saw herds of elephants, herds of giraffes. We saw 3 separate leopards, actually a mother and a baby. We saw warthogs. We saw, as I said, a herd of elephants. We saw a whole, I don't know what you'd call them, but herd of giraffes. Absolutely amazing. The weather has been extremely good, although we've heard the thunder in the background. I'm sure that's still over the mountain a couple of 100 miles to the east. I'll tell you, folks, I was hurting coming down. My thighs are still hurting. And I spent a half an hour in the shower when I first got into the hotel the other night. But again, I digress as usual. So today we're actually staying in the Serengeti National Park in glamping style tents. And there's a beautiful bed in there, and it's a bathroom, no power. The power is over in the public or common area. And we are going to, tomorrow morning, go on a balloon ride over the savannah. See if we can, again, see herds of animals, which I think we are going to be able to. again, pretty amazing place overall. Absolutely stunning place. And, well, for this segment, I'll just close it out because we're sort of just setting up the day, an incredible half day. They really didn't expect to do very much today, but we did an enormous amount. And so I will say until tomorrow morning, until we're on the balloon, which I'll be recording from there. We'll see you until then. Hey, it's Don again. Had to come on to fill up another segment. We're sitting out here on, again, still the first night, and this is absolutely amazing. Within about quarter to a half mile, there is, and keep in mind we're in a tent, and they've briefed us on the tent that if there are animals, like big animals, that come and eat the grass at night, they're not going to come into the tent, and that we aren't supposed to leave the tent. If we get sick for some reason, we ring a cowbell, and a ranger with a elephant gun comes by and helps us for whatever reason. But they assured us that we just had this briefing, they assured us that no animals, big animals, have ever come inside the tents. But I'm sitting here looking over the savannah at perfect weather outside, drinking a Diet Coke, product placement, yes, and there is a herd of elephants, and I mean a herd, about 25 of them, different than the ones we saw earlier in the day, just simply walking by. Every once in a while sticking their trunks down and eating, but about a quarter of a mile away. It's just absolutely unbelievable. And the other day I had decided, just as a side note as well, that, and this is for those of you who are interested in other episodes of the Don Sullivan Show, which are going to be completely medical, which are coming up in the relatively near future. And specifically, you all know that despite my abilities to climb mountain and my fitness and so on, I'm diabetic. I've been diabetic my whole life, and it can be pretty bad. And so I made the mistake of agreeing to eat a candy bar the other day. Well, I repeated that mistake today. The other day made sense because I needed the calories as I was climbing the mountain. And the lunch they gave us today included a little candy bar. What could the harm be? Well, my blood sugar shot up to 248 within a half an hour. So for those of you who are diabetic as well, or just know those numbers, that is really bad. And got to stop that. Got to not make that mistake again. So just thought I had to add in this extra little segment here because of these herds of elephants. And then, of course, I digressed into the personal medical point. But again, we will be doing a hot air balloon tomorrow morning. We're looking over the savannah. I will be broadcasting or recording at least live from the heights of the hot air balloon at 5:30 in the morning. And I'll let you know what happens then. And until then, see ya. Well, hi, folks. Welcome back to the second night of our Serengeti National Park in Tanzania expedition. It's been absolutely amazing all day. The number of animals that are free-flowing and wandering is absolutely incredible. We saw herds of hippopotamuses, herds of giraffes. We saw a dozen lions, all of which were sleeping until all the cubs woke up and were walking around on the tops of the rocks. It was a rough start to the day because we intended on taking the balloon ride over the Serengeti plains that I described earlier. But when we got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, it was pitch black out, and we got picked up by the balloon ride company and driven for an hour, and I'm really not kidding about this, through the most torrential downpours I've seen in a long time. That one day down in Colombia was kind of like that a few episodes back, a few months ago, but it was just absolutely continuing to the point where these rubber or these dirt roads here are really washes, and we drove most of the way for an hour in rivers. We saw a hippopotamus actually walk in front of the car with the 7 people in it. We saw crocodiles, and we were fender deep in water most of the time. And then we got to the balloon area, and guess what? Nothing happened, because they decided that it was too inclement weather to actually go. Which, of course, 2 hours earlier, we could have told them, and we could have stayed in bed, blah, 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 blah. But the rest of the day turned out to be absolutely incredible. And, in fact, it ended in one of the most bizarre situations I ever experienced in my life. So this campsite is the epitome of glamping. So huge tents the size of good hotel rooms. But you have to walk down an alley, about a quarter mile maybe, to get past all the different houses or tents. They are really house tents. And you have a zipper to zip things up, and the night before proved to me that they were very much watertight and they were very secure and so on. The wind had been terrible, and the rain was terrible, and blah, 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 and it all worked out. But before we went to sleep, we watched this about a quarter mile away, and I know I mentioned this herd of elephants walking by. And it was an incredible sunset, because this huge herd of elephants is walking by. It's about, 40 or 50 of them. And what I didn't realize is a couple had broken off and had actually walked in back of the tents. So sometime in the middle of this second night, evening, we're very, very tired because we got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. There was a lot of racket outside, and there was a lot of very familiar huffing and puffing noises that sounded like something out of a cartoon to me. And then one of the guards came by the zipper door and said, "You guys need to get out of here now," because there was an actual elephant right by the tent. Now, we got out, and they were able to shoo the elephant away. And they assured us that the elephants, when they come by there, or any of the animals, don't really go into the tents, but holy cow, that was absolutely amazing. So we went back into the tent, and then the whole night, that elephant was coming back and forth and making all kinds of noise, and clearly that elephant was competing with the jackals out in the fields, who make their own distinct noises to try to keep us awake as long as possible through the evening, because guess what? We're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning again to go on another balloon ride, which was rescheduled. So it's going to be wonderful. I'll get back to you then tomorrow when we actually take that ride. But for now, I'm exhausted, so I'm calling it quits. I'm as tired as I was climbing Kilimanjaro, kind of. So until tomorrow night segment and report, we'll see ya. Okay, folks, I'm back. It's Don again. And we have just had one of the most amazing experiences that anyone could ever have. Great morning today. Again, got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Again, took the same ride. There were some bridges that were out from the day before's thunderstorms. As I've said to you a few times here, it really does appear that the rainy season has come early. Don't believe it when they tell you the rainy season in the Serengeti starts in March, because apparently not now. It is mid-February that it's in full swing. But we took a little bit longer to get to this balloon place where they launched the balloons. We got there and we had the most unbelievable ride. I've never been in a balloon before. Expert pilots, there's like 6 or 7 balloons up there, all flying around over the Serengeti, watching and looking at all these animals. Incredible numbers of herds of wildebeest and water buffalo 2 different herds of lions, up to 25 of them. Giraffes everywhere, herds of elephants. You can see, of course, forever. I suppose that this is kind of a rendition of what it would have looked like in the Midwest, say in Nebraska in the late 1800s, before the horrific slaughter, gratuitous slaughter of the American bison throughout the Midwest in the 1800s and the West. But I don't know. If it looked like anything, it looked like this. Maybe I'll try to include some pictures in some of these episodes, but we literally saw thousands of the water buffalo and the wildebeest and, again, all kinds of other incredible animals as we were floating along 300 or so feet off the ground, only to land on the ground and slide along for about 100 yards before the water balloon came to a stop. It was overall pretty incredible. And then we took the rest of the day driving to our next stop, which is going to be in a place called Karatu, down in south of the Serengeti National Park boundaries. But as we went down through there, we saw not thousands, not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands or millions of wildebeest and zebras and other animals. We saw lions sitting on the side of the road, just hanging out, because I guess they had their fill to a point where they didn't even want to bother anymore. We saw cheetahs doing the exact same thing about a quarter mile off of the road. The lion sitting on the side of the road was incredible. The jackals all sitting there. The number of actual animals, again, I go back to what I said in the last segment. It sort of can hearken one back to what it might have looked like in the plains of Kansas and Nebraska and South Dakota in the middle 1800s, before the horrific slaughter of the American bison. And I don't mean to belabor that point, but I had never seen anything this prolific. But for literally 100 miles driving, we saw nothing from horizon to horizon, because in the Serengeti there's no trees. I would suspect that if you were in Yellowstone and there were no trees, you could see lots of animals as well. But here there are very few trees. There's these ashka trees have the canopy, but it's for the most part a huge grassland, and you can see forever, and all you can see are all these animals, and they are migrating towards the areas of most food, which in the case of the way the rainy season works, is really interesting, the cycle. The more rain, the higher the grass becomes, and the more the grass is. And when you get down in the south of the Serengeti, in the south part of Tanzania, you are going to have these incredibly wide open plains. They're wide open as well when you're up in the north part of the Serengeti National Park, where we have spent the last few days. But in this case, it really looks like an ocean of grass that just goes from horizon to horizon. And so they migrate down during the rainy season, and then they go back upwards, north that is, all the way up past the Kenyan border, and that's during the dry season. So they have pretty much a 6-month cycle where they go back and forth. And there is just so many of them, it utterly boggles the mind, like looking at stars in the sky. So we are in a hotel tonight. We're going to look at the Ngorongoro crater tomorrow, which is a huge volcanic caldera with a lot more wildlife that is in it from the Serengeti area. Haven't been there before. We drove past it today before we got to this hotel. These will be the last couple of days of this particular adventure into Africa, and we'll be heading back to the U.S., but we're going to make the best of these last couple of days, and I'm going to give you as much information on the Don Sullivan Show as I possibly can to help you understand the true nature of some of these areas in the world that I go to, and some of these different endeavors that I attempt, the levels of difficulty and the levels of euphoria that you can experience, the levels of joy and the levels of awe. As I said, the numbers of animals, the big animals that you could see today were literally like stars in the sky. So on that note, we got another early morning to go find some more cool things to talk about. And until then, till tomorrow, we will see you. Well, folks, this is Don back again for what will be, I imagine, the final segment of the 4th episode of the Climbing Kilimanjaro episode, the Running Around the Serengeti on Tour episode of the 4-episode series of Climbing Kilimanjaro. It was an absolutely amazing day again. We went down into the Ngorongoro crater and saw literally hundreds of thousands of animals of all kinds. And a few things that really are of amazing note. First of all, the way all these animals hang out together, these different species, the zebras, the wildebeest, the water buffalo, in these huge herds, the birds, the flamingos, and other birds, the ostriches. But they kind of hang out with the elephants, and amazingly, they're very, very close to the major predators, the jackals and hyenas, and most significantly, the lions. We literally, driving along the road, would see lions sitting on the road. They were too full, I think, and too lazy at that point to worry about where they were going at any given moment, at least at that point, maybe later. We did see one very compelling moment in which a lion was hanging out at a water hole that she was crouched down in, clearly in a position that indicated game time was imminent, and this group of zebras was slowly approaching the water hole. There's about 7 or 8 of them, and then all of a sudden they stopped. Apparently they smelled danger somehow, and they went into a different direction. So the thirst would have to be satisfied in some other water hole somewhere within this massive crater, which the Ngorongoro, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, crater is the biggest freestanding crater in the world, obviously volcanic. I shouldn't say freestanding, it's the biggest intact crater or caldera in the world, in which all of the 1,000-foot high walls around the entire caldera, which is approximately 15 kilometers in diameter, are totally intact. But we finished, and it was an absolutely amazing, wonderful 3 weeks overall. Checked off a minor bucket list effort, that is climbing Kilimanjaro. Got to the Serengeti as well, and tomorrow maybe our greatest challenge as we attempt to take multiple airlines back to the United States. We have to actually go through London and land on Ethiopian Airlines at Gatwick, and then we have a 6-hour layover, but we have to go through customs, pick up our bags, and then find our way over to Heathrow to fly back to the United States. So that should be kind of interesting. But I want to thank everybody for listening again to the Don Sullivan Show for these 4 episodes of Climbing Kilimanjaro. It's certainly a worthy effort. I'm not going to bother to try to summarize everything that I've talked about in these last 4 episodes, but it's been absolutely incredible. And I plan on doing a lot more stuff in the near future, and I will share it all with you. A little bit of a sneak preview to the upcoming events. I got a couple of medical things to take care of. Some are usually not talked about. I'm going to need prostate surgery, so guess what? We're going to talk about everything that has to do with that and all the ramifications of the surgeries and the medications and so on. Remember, the Don Sullivan Show is dedicated to be as open as possible about all things that are science, technology, and computing. We plan on having a number of different guests to talk about some books. We're even going to do some book reviews, and that should be interesting. But there will be a variety of very interesting and fun episodes coming in the future. I know we did miss a couple of weeks. My friend Jersey Steve put together a best of, and we missed 1 week in there because, I'm 7,000 miles away and didn't get the content produced as soon as possible. Or I guess I did get it produced as soon as possible, just not as soon as necessary. But on that last note, I will try not to let that happen again, but I will tell you, and I will say this again, no matter where I am in the world, even if I'm not in this world, if I'm on the moon, which I don't intend to be in the near future, but I was as close to it as I guess I'll get on foot when I was on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. And it doesn't matter where I am. There's one philosophy that I go by, and you should too. And remember, folks, that all at-bats are situational. And see you till next time.